Well, this is an absolute thrill. We have Mike Bolt, one of the keepers of the Stanley Cup in the Boston 25 News studios today. Thank you for making the trip. I know it's incredibly busy all year, but this time of year especially, so we appreciate you showing up.
Well, we're happy to be here. It's an exciting time of year. Obviously, the Cup can be hoisted in the next week and a half to 2 weeks, and you know, it's a lot of fun to be traveling around at this time of year for sure.
So describe to people what your job description is, because to be the keeper of the Cup, or at least one of them, is pretty cool.
Yeah, you know, growing up in Canada, I didn't dream of being the keeper. I dreamed of trying to win it, but that reality never came close to happening. So second best thing, get a job at the Hall of Fame, and I was fortunate enough to be appointed the keeper of the Cup 20 years ago. And my job entails taking the Cup around the world, doing a lot of marketing and promotion with the Cup, dealing with our sponsors, dealing with the NHL and the Hall of Fame. Obviously, in the summer, when the team wins the Cup, we're with every individual player, coach, trainer, and upper management that get to have a day anywhere in the world. So on any given summer, you could be into 6 to 8 different countries.
Now, with that job responsibility comes a certain amount of discretion, because there are players and families who I'm sure entrust you to not necessarily share everything that you see when these guys are with the Cup. So is that part of the description? There has to be that element of trust between you and the guys, the coaches and the players?
Yeah, for sure, and there is. I mean, there's stories you tell and there's stories that you keep and take to your grave. And you know, you definitely get to see a lot of different things. Things have changed over the last 10 years with social media, so really at the end of the day, there's no secrets anyways. The job really, you know, we're also there to answer questions about it. The players have questions about the history of it. You know, it's 127 years old, weighs 35 pounds, and made of 97% silver, 3% nickel, stuff like that. And then, you know, we point out different names and different, you know, for example, right here in 1984, this is kind of the easiest way to tell it's real. Peter Pockenham put his father on the Cup in 1984, and his father had nothing to do with it, so the NHL X'd it out. And if you go to the Hockey Hall of Fame, you won't see that on the replica.
Interesting. Now, what does it take, without getting too detailed, I guess you kind of have to get detailed, but it might be more long-winded than I would expect, to qualify to get your name on the Cup? I know there are some specific rules about who can get on there and who can't in any given season with any given champion.
At the end of the day, really, it's up to the organization. They get 52 names. It's their decision on who gets to go on and who doesn't. There is a small criteria where you have to play, maybe you have the regular season, or play in the playoffs, or play in the final. But really, at the end of the day, the team decides on who goes on and who doesn't. And 52 names is what's allowed.
Well, I want to hop into the 2011 champs, the Bruins, who we're looking at right here, because you had a chance to spend time with some of those guys after they won the Cup back in 2011. So if you can, share some of the stories of some of the players who are still playing on the 2019 team who did get a day with the Cup themselves back then.
Well, I mean, Chara, of course, the captain, brought it back to Slovakia, and he was not the first guy to bring it to his hometown. Marian Hossa was, and there's also Marian Gaborik that is in the same town. They actually live on the same street, and they had a big celebration in this really old castle in Slovakia, and just, you know, seeing that's such a big hockey country too, and seeing all the fans come out and to congratulate Chara on bringing the Cup home, to you know, Sean Thornton bringing it back to his hometown of Oshawa, Ontario, and celebrating in Oshawa and in Toronto, and he actually took it up the CN Tower, which is the tallest building in the world, and then just took it to a few different bars, and again, being in Toronto with the Cup being, you know, such a hockey mecca, people were pretty, as much as, you know, Toronto's not Boston's not the biggest. People don't like Boston that much up in Toronto, but they were thrilled to see Sean bring it back to Toronto, and like Claude Julien having it up in just outside of Ottawa, Ontario, and having a small parade through his town, and just seeing the reaction. I mean, a town of like 2,000 people, I think 3,500 people showed up, so it's pretty cool.
So famously, or maybe infamously, there have been injuries related to people hoisting the Cup, most notably with our captain.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually the only time I've ever noticed an injury, and I didn't notice at the time, but if you look at the video when Chara lifts the Cup, he knocks his hat off, but he actually clipped himself in the head, and before he passed it off, I mean, he passed it off, and then he started bleeding. He had to go into the locker room and get 3 stitches, but I'm sure those were the best 3 stitches he's ever gotten in his life.
So who's the guy who's on this the most? Is it Scotty Bowman?
No.
Who is it?
I mean, Jean Beliveau is on there 17 times.
That makes sense.
Right, he's on there 10 as a player and 7 in different management. Scotty's on there 14 times, and the player that's on there the most is Henri Richard with 11 Stanley Cups.
What's the first reaction most players have when they see this thing for the first time?
You know, the guys, they're always amazed when, you know, they tell me, like, when they get it, their adrenaline's so fired up, and when they get to hoist it over their head, I mean, apparently it's as light as a feather. I mean, it always feels 35 pounds to me, but guys have told me on their Cup days, this is the same Cup I had on the ice? And I'm like, yes, it is. And they're like, it feels heavier today. And I'm like, your adrenaline, you're pretty fired. And he goes, oh yeah, I never thought of it that way. And then, you know, they're hockey fans too, and it's really cool. I always tell them, find an hour or two, put the cup on the table, get a few cool pops, and sit around and check out the names. And whether it's guys you played with in the past through junior or minor hockey, or to guys that you idolized growing up, and you can find their names on here and just check out the history. And guys always tell me that's some of their favorite parts of their cup day, just sitting back, looking at the names and chilling with it.
Okay. Has anyone ever been baptized in the cup?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. We've had a few different babies in there.
Wow, very cool. How about, I would assume things have been eaten out of the cup?
Yeah, cereal to lobster bisque to ice cream sundaes to poutine, spaghetti and meatballs, sushi, Jell-O, just to name a few different foods.
Whose responsibility is it then when it's all said and done to clean that up? Does that come to you?
This guy.
So have you ever been challenged to the point where you're like, how am I going to clean that up?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not that hard. I used to brag that my mom used to call me a professional dishwasher. But no, it's soap and water. I mean, to be honest with you, after a cup day, we'll either clean in the player's shower or use a driveway with a garden hose with soap and water, wash it, rinse it, and then give it a buff dry, and it comes out nice and shiny. It always comes out clean after, you know, nice and shiny after we wash it with soap and water.
Well, I would think you're almost like a parent, and you see this cup go to the ice once the Stanley Cup has been clinched, and what goes through your mind at that moment where you're like, well, I guess my kid's going off to school now, right?
It's a little bit like that, yeah, for sure. And, you know, you handle it with the white gloves and the babiness of it, and then, you know, it goes off to the winning team, and you're there on the kind of the fly on the wall, keeping an eye on things. But it's pretty funny to see after all season long handling it with such prestige, and then all of a sudden the beer and everything, which is awesome. Don't get me wrong, but it's funny to sit back and watch that happen all the time. Is pretty funny and pretty wild.
I have a history of working at the league, so I know you almost remove yourself from rooting from specific teams, but you are from Toronto, so I'll ask this in two ways. Am I right in assuming that if the Maple Leafs were able to hoist the cup and you had this job, that would be one of your biggest thrills?
It would be nice to be work at home. To be sleeping in my own bed would be for sure something that would be a lot of fun to be a part of growing up in that city. You know, as a hockey fan, I did grow up a Leaf fan. Now people ask me what my favorite team is. I have 31 of them.
Yep, I know that feeling.
But yeah, it would be neat to see.
Then I ask you this, what was to you the most memorable, the most meaningful champion when you think about the whole story, the journey, the people who were on the team, the whole thing?
That's a hard question. I mean, you know, anytime you get to hoist the Stanley Cup and win it, it's special for every single person, whether it's the players, coaches, trainers, and you know, you look at, you know, let's go back to, you know, Ray Bourque in 2001 is probably the most memorable time, the cup being won, with Joe Sakic accepting it from Commissioner Gary Bettman and not even raising it over his head. Joe didn't even want it. He wanted Ray to accept it from the commissioner, but the tradition is the captain accepts it. And, you know, Joe, being the guy that he is, grabs it and doesn't even raise it over his head, hands it right to Ray. And when Ray's got it up over his head and the tears in his eyes to his family, I mean, 22 years chasing this thing. And I think, obviously, everybody in Colorado, but I think even everybody here in Boston was so happy for Ray to be able to do that. It's probably one of the more memorable hoists I can think of in the last 20 years.
Signature moment for sure that a lot of people here in Boston appreciate it. I'll leave you with this. Can you give us a general idea of what your schedule is over the next 10, 14 days?
Well, I mean, it's, you know, this time, like today is all media rep, just kind of promoting, talking about the game and everything like that. As we get to Game 4, we'll see where we're at in the series, you know, and then, you know, it's kind of just waiting to see what happens. And once it's won, it's 20-hour days going at 100 miles an hour, taking around the city that's won into starting the world tour. And like I said, we could be in 6 to 8 different countries on any given summer, especially if the Bruins win. I know there's a lot of different, between the U.S., Canada, and Europeans, there's a lot of different countries represented on the Boston Bruins.
Good stuff, Mike. We really appreciate you and the whole team bringing the cup here. And this is a day most of us here in our studio won't forget, so thanks very much.
Thanks for having us.